that's more female, that's far more ethnically diverse, and coming into the gyms and joining up and becoming members. And I've watched this thing over 2 decades unfold. And I think that what I see now is an explosion of activity in new gyms, not just here in Southern California, but nationwide in New York and Chicago and the Pacific Northwest and the Bay Area. There's this really fast increase in activity in the gym openings and in the membership. I go into the gyms because I run an event called Climb Smart in Joshua Tree. And so I'm in the gyms and there's suddenly a dozen where there was 3. And so I see that they all have customers. It's not that it's a market share war in the gym scene, at least in Southern California. It's very much attracting people that just simply aren't outdoors people, and they're not outdoors people yet, or they're not climbers yet. And even if a small percentage of them decide they want to climb outdoors, that's a significant opportunity for the outdoor industry. So that is the portal that I see that I'm super excited about.
Cool. Welcome, Daniel. It's nice to have you here. Can you give our audience a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. So my brother and I kind of saw this trajectory, I guess, of what's happening with indoor climbing. And we recognized it maybe 14 or 15 years ago when I was still in high school. And I felt like it was going to be the future and kind of the gateway into outdoor adventure and outdoor lifestyle. And at the time, the climbing gyms weren't anything special. It was a lot of plywood. And I remember at our local gym, we'd boulder on the base of the route walls, and the owner didn't understand what we were doing, so he, threw a bunch of inner tubes below us, like rafts, and we were bouncing, and spraining ankles, and it was unbelievable. But I guess even then, I recognized what was going to be coming up ahead, and just the simplicity and the access to climbing and how simple it is in these markets. And I guess we've been fortunate to grow our, the product side of our brand, and along with commercial climbing facilities also as the industry has grown.
And you really have become a pioneer. One of my favorite things that I heard in the halls at the CWA event was your brother saying, people used to look at us like we were complete freak shows at this place. And now they're kind of starting to get what we want to do here. 15 years in.
Yeah, it took 15 years. Yeah, it's pretty neat. You guys had talked a little bit about some of the bigger companies kind of recognizing the potential and seeing what's been built. And I think they're finally starting to recognize this movement and what's happening. And, bigger companies are trying to buy in, or they're trying to figure out how to reach these communities. And I think there's a responsibility also on the climbing gym owners' parts as well. They've spent decades building a community and building relationships, and building a facility where people trust them and like them. And I think gym owners need to realize how special that is, and to some degree need to be able to protect it and protect their members too from things outside of our industry, or certain people trying to come in and reach that demographic. I just think it's something special, and I really do hope gym owners start to understand that.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Are you talking about like basically creating almost a uniform experience across the country around like what it's like to maybe get your first gateway drug in a climbing gym?
I guess it'd be really hard to do, but something like that could be really interesting. I guess even from like sponsoring, getting sponsorships for events. A lot of gym owners, the old model, they would, they'll take a few, harnesses or something, and they'll hang banners all over their gym. And I think the communities that they've built and that relationship that they have on the brick and mortar level, I think is really, really special. And I think it's really valuable over time. And I think it's important just to protect those communities. And from a lot of outside sources that could come in, or be, you know, bigger brands that are now seeing the opportunity, that are trying to take advantage of the situation instead of believing in it from the beginning.
Interesting. Brad, do you have anything you'd like to add on that? I have a feeling you do.
Well, I do. I mean, I think it's a good point, and I think that the climbing gyms are their own organic communities, and I think that they'll drive what they want to have and participate in it. And you know, I think they'll gravitate towards the authentic brands. I mean, Daniel, you have an amazing authentic brand, and you know, certainly one to watch. You can do a lot of things with it, and I think climbers naturally gravitate toward it. I mean, there's a few other brands in the space that have come up through it. I mean, literally, you know, I'm thinking organic, you know, is another one that came up through the system that way, and there's a strong following with those, and many other brands that are in the space. I would agree with you that I don't think people should come in and buy their way in. I think that the real estate is valuable. I mean, in my own gym, somebody came in without my knowledge and put up a bunch of brand posters for another brand, and the first thing I did is took them down, because you know, that's not what our space is for. We can negotiate that, we can talk about it, but I didn't want it leveraged without it coming from within, number one, and number two, without a conversation about it. So I think you're right, that the spaces and the communities need to be guarded, and I think that those communities will also want to embrace certain brands naturally.
I have something I want to bring up on that level. Sure. So I was in my local bookstore the other day, and I shot a photo of the Declaration of the Indie Bound. We've all seen that, right, in our local bookstores. I'm just going to read the first sentence here, because I think it's really exactly what you're talking about. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for individuals to denounce the corporate bans which threaten to homogenize our cities and our souls, we must celebrate the powers that make us unique and declare the causes which compel us to remain independent. Right? I think that's spot on. And if you think about what's happening in retail right now, I think retail is trying to go back to that, whereas climbing gyms are poised to take that. There's no ground you have to turn around and retreat or 360. Like, you're there. It's right there for you. So I think that what you're talking about, Daniel, is the opportunity to really preserve that and keep it special.
Yeah, exactly. That's really neat. I think you guys have ideas as far as how many people are being introduced to the sport and climbing, and the responsibilities that gyms have as well for introducing people to the outdoors?
I mean, I think Kenji can speak to that from the Access Fund point of view. I mean, Kenji's on the board of the Access Fund, and you know, and also runs the Climb Smart program. So, lost Kenji's sound.
I muted myself because I've got a blower in the background, but sorry. Yeah, so not just the Access Fund has data for sure. I think that we have great relationships with a lot of gyms and local climbing organizations who also have triangulated relationships with the gyms. For example, with Climb Smart, that's the place where we get a lot of the attendees for the event, is people interested in climbing but haven't been to Josh. They haven't been in a traditional climbing setting like Joshua Tree. So what a perfect way to sort of have safety in numbers and come on out and experience in a safe setting what it's like to climb, and learning some of the topics. Sorry, the dog is squeaking in the background.
That's okay.
And so on the data side, I'm actually been surprised that there really isn't much, and Brad and I have talked about this. There is recognition among the research community that indoor climbing walls is a market, and the IBIS World reports that I've had access to really haven't caught up to what's happening. It's so recent. It really is the only place I've even seen a glimmer of what's going on, but it's putting the growth at a national level kind of in the 2% zone. My experience in the metros is significantly more than that over the past 5 years, and not just LA. Of course, that's the market I know best, but also in New York with Brooklyn Boulders, in Chicago, in your region, Daniel. You know, you guys could speak to this. Boulder's a little different, so because it's had a lot of gyms per capita for a long time, but this is a thing where the data, I don't think, has even caught up to the trend yet.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think we're in an interesting position where there's actually more participants than the market reflects. Kenji, you noted that national park attendance is up, and certainly climbing gyms are up. I mean, my own gym is up huge numbers this year over last, and last year was a giant reach over the year before. And so we're just on this huge growth spike. But, I don't think it's reflected in the sales numbers, or I don't think it's reflected in the market numbers, because you just don't need a lot to start out climbing in gyms. But as people start to go outside, whether that's on their first sport routes or their first overnight camping trip, or they start to go outside, I mean, two things will happen. Number one, they'll need to buy more stuff. They'll need to get backpacks and tents and sleeping bags and all that. And number two, they'll need to get education on how to behave outdoors. And I think the Access Fund plays a big role in that. But also, Ken, we've been talking about an ad we're taking out for our gym, in a new bouldering guide, and it's basically going to be, hey, welcome to the outdoor world. Here's what you need to know. Is our ad for our indoor gym will be in this outdoor bouldering guide with that.
I think it's really important what you're talking about, and that's some place where the Access Fund is very focused right now on creating that gym to crag continuum and that experience. We're partners with Black Diamond in the Rock Project, which is new for this year. We've hired a guy named Travis Herbert, who's a great educator and an inspiring presenter. I just saw him up here in Tustin when we did a Rock Project roundtable where we circled some of the athletes and leaders in the local community to talk about this gym to crag transition, as there's hundreds, thousands of more people entering the outdoors through the gym portal. What are they expecting, and how are they being coached when it comes to everything from environmental impact of using the bathroom to local endangered species or raptor closures, or all the different things that we face in the outdoor world that aren't issues in the indoor scene.
Well, my hope is that we're going to keep it light, because all of that feels really heavy, and I want people to be just stoked. I mean, I'll remember it for the rest of my life. I learned how to climb indoors at UC Davis in their little gym. And then a really good friend of mine named Jared, who actually worked at A16, Kenji, up in Davis, took me to Donner Pass, and holy shit. That was a big, but honestly, it was just go out and try it. And I fell in love with it. It was airy and crazy, and I just loved it. And the more simple it was, the better it was. So I totally get that, he was a guide, and I was lucky he showed me the ropes figuratively and literally. But point being is we need to keep it simple. Those things are important, but let's just keep them stoked.
I think it's really, it's great. There's four of us on this panel here, and Daniel and Kristin, you both started climbing indoors. That's why you're here, really. And it just shows the pathway. Kenji and I were involved in early co-ops. There were no gyms in the time, but we both were involved in co-ops in the late 80s, early 90s. So we had indoor spaces to climb, even though we were primarily outdoor climbers. So it's definitely a very powerful gateway, call it drug or call it point of entry or what have you. But here we are, we're hooked, and we're here years later, and that's awesome.
It is.
Hey, Daniel, are you seeing, I'm curious about in your region in the Midwest, are you seeing the kind of impact outdoors that is driven from the indoor experience?
That's a good question. The areas are definitely busier, but I feel like it takes people a while to get outside. I think it takes them a while to come to the gym the first time, and then they're introduced from a friend, and they get a little bit deeper and might buy a 10-punch pass or something, and then they're a member, and before you know it, they've kind of have a new community of friends, and then from there, maybe a few of those friends climb outside, so they might slowly transition. But we're seeing a lot of people get really strong even in the gym, they're climbing V7, V8 with the setting at the gym, and at that time, then they're starting to transition outside. So I think it takes a little bit longer than we think, and having those people in the gyms longer is, might be a good thing to help them understand the culture and make that transition. I don't think it's immediate.
So with you guys seeing all the growth in numbers, like as you said, year over year, Brad, your numbers are way up, and I imagine the same is true for SoiLL and your facility. And Kenji, I know you're seeing this in Southern California. Is there a specific demographic, or is it really across the board?
Our number one customer is 23 to 30. I mean, that's our number one demographic, which is really surprising considering we're in a college town. We expected to skew a little younger. We have a strong group that's, sub 18 also, but they're way down on the pipeline. Our second largest group is 40 to 45 roughly. And that reflects kind of young professionals or active parents who are in our gym. But, what's really interesting, and, I made the comment at CWA when I presented that, I've been in, 30 plus climbing gyms in the past year. And Kenji noted this too. What we're seeing in the gyms is really what outdoor would like to become. I mean, there's a lot more diversity. There's a lot more youth. There's a lot more, gender equality. Many gyms have, like our own gym, we have over 50% female members. That's huge.
That's mostly due to you, right, Brad?
Not directly, but 20 years ago in our co-op, we started Madison Women's Climbers in our co-op, and they had their own night in the co-op, and that group still continues, and that's probably why. So we recognized that was important, and an important group that they had on their own, and we addressed it early on. I mean, think of it, in the day when we started the gym, over 90% of climbers were men. That was the math. And so we started a women's climbing group, and now over 50% are female. That's huge. That shows the changing face of outdoors. It shows the changing face of indoor climbing. And, our staff is diverse. We have people of color. We have, we actually, transgender. We have all different kinds of groups in our community who are very strong parts of our community. And that's just not something that has come necessarily out of outdoor. And I think it's really exciting to see these people coming into our, to the gym, and then also coming into the greater community too.
There's so many people climbing inside from so many diverse backgrounds and experiences. You can have two gyms in the same city, and one of them is in the suburbs and one of them is downtown, and you have completely different user groups. Some of the suburbs gyms might have lots of birthday parties, sell tons of family memberships, have a huge youth team, versus a gym 20 minutes away downtown that's going to have a lot of young professionals, a lot of college students. And I mean, we're even seeing that, in multiple markets we've, looked at, and a lot of the different customers that we deal with. And it's pretty neat. For our gym, we chose to go downtown into an urban area, and we're really fortunate that it's a really cool demographic of people. It really is a community. It really is special. Like, people are getting engaged there, and people are getting jobs there, and they're meeting a realtor, and they're buying their first house, and they're all hanging out and going on bike rides and running together and stuff like that. And it really is just it's a really cool thing, and it gives me like hope for the future of climbing. And it's neat that there's so many people though that doesn't have to be your model. You can be focused on families and having more of an entertainment type facility and getting lots of kids in there and things like that. And I think gyms overall are doing a good job of reaching the entire demographic. I think it's hard to do both at the same time, but it's just a pretty neat time.
Mm-hmm. Kenji,
I keep doing that. Sorry, the signal. I wanted to ask a question. I wanted to ask a question of the gym owners here. That I've talked to other gym owners who actually say Well, we actually don't encourage people to go outside and climb because A, we want them in our gym, and B, there's impact out there. If we send 100 people to the crag, it's gonna make a mess. So what are your thoughts on that? Is that a consistency or is that gym to gym?
I can speak to that. I mean, in our gym, we're a small gym, so it's really good that we have a strong community. I mean, just kind of riffing off Daniel's points, I think at one point recently, I counted over 30 kids that have been born because of people who met in our gym. All these marriages, best friends. I mean, we've been going on 20 years, but 20 years ago, we are in the core of very old school trad climbing area. And when we opened the indoor gym, it was very threatening to the climbers.
Scandalous.
Yeah, we were actually boycotted by poor demographic climbers. We were boycotted by.
Oh my gosh.
They didn't want to be part of selling out the sport or what have you, and they were really fearful. I mean, this is at a time when if you didn't get to Devil's Lake by a certain time in the morning, you wouldn't get a parking spot and you wouldn't get your rope on the right part of the crag that you wanted. I mean, people were getting alpine starts to kind of get their space for the day, not because anybody liked to climb at 5 a.m., but that was the only way you could get the rope where you wanted. But here we are 20 years later, and while there's, I think, more people going to Devil's Lake, they're doing very different things now. I mean, the whole bouldering scene has developed, so the impact has been spread out. It's not so keyed on the crags. And, that's true of all South Central Wisconsin. I mean, there's gyms in Chicago, Minneapolis, Milwaukee, Madison, and they all use this one main climbing area. And yet everyone's not going to the same space that they used to, number one. And number two, I mean, as a small gym, I love it when people get outside and they come to us in the evenings and on weekends. It's kind of the same reason why a lot of health clubs start running groups. People come in, use the showers, then get out of the gym. It doesn't take up treadmill space. They come back, they're part of the community. We just become a social hub that way. But I mean, that's my perspective.
Thanks.
One of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit is just the fact that at the Climbing Wall Association, this was my first time going. Okay, so I know you guys have all gone. Kenji, have you gone to it before?
No, my first time too.
Okay, but Brad and Daniel, you guys are veterans. And
I'm just a 2-year veteran. I've set my staff for 6 years. I've only gone the last 2 years. So
okay. What I'm inquiring about is really about the exhibitors. And the fact that is that something that has grown in terms of the product exhibitors that were there? Because obviously they're sensing the opportunity of having an experiential backdrop for their brand within your gyms. And I know retail has been a little bit of a point of contention. We don't have to spend a huge amount of time on this because I know there's so many other things to cover. But I just wanted to ask kind of what your perspective was in terms of, are there a lot more exhibitors there in terms of products they're hoping to push through your gym? Or is that something that's always been there, having been a first timer this year?
I guess from my experience, when we started, we were one of 3 brands exhibiting, and we had a card table that I had gotten from Walmart or something and set it out, set some holds on it. And it was in the Boulder Outlook, I believe, which I'm not even sure is there anymore. It is. Okay.
I think we had a sales meeting there this year.
Oh, okay. And is that where the pool is with the boulders and stuff? Okay. So our table was the flooring was messed up. So it was on an angle. So products kept sliding off of our table. And it was so bad. There was it was really, I'm ashamed. But it's been cool to see it over the years grow almost into, I really felt like this year, even compared to last year, it's turning into a really focused trade show, basically.
That's how I felt about it when I walked in there. So, just looking, we don't have to, again, spend too much time on it, but I spoke with one of your peers from a gym in Montana, and all of the specialty shops had just gone out of business. And some of our brands at Verde had, basically gotten into the retail segment there. And so it just seems interesting because I feel like that experiential backdrop and just the theater of the brand that can be presented in a climbing gym is an interesting prospect, I think, for a lot of the brands who maybe aren't feeling like, the point of entry of specialty retail has evolved on that level, or that they have boots on the ground in those communities on that level. I think that's a really important thing because we can, be loud and proud across social media and owned media with our brands. But when it comes to actually like ingraining ourselves within the communities, climbing gyms are an exceptional portal for that, for brands. And I just think it's interesting that like there's a little bit, from what I sensed anyway, a point of contention between like a retail allocation in a gym versus straight up gym, like just for climbing. So I thought I'd just throw that one out there.
I'll share. Can I share a quick story before we sign off? Just my son, who just turned 18, just received a gift from a company called Gillette, right? So they sent him a really nice razor, right? And it's free. Like, here you go. You're 18. Happy birthday. And I thought that was the most brilliant thing. And this is exactly what you're talking about, Kristin, is this opportunity for young people to be exposed to brands in a new setting that's interesting, and it gets them hooked. Now I'm sure I'm going to have to buy Gillette blades until he moves out, or hopefully he'll buy them. But you know what I mean? It's that. We keep using the term gateway, and but it really is that, and it has been that for a long time. It's just suddenly there's more excitement, there's more openings, and I can't say I can name one gym that I know that's closed down recently. Like, it's not even a market share war. It's just opening up, and they're all kind of busy. So I don't know. I don't know what the future holds, but that is, who can say that? Who can say that in the outdoor industry beyond these gyms?
Most other user groups are declining. I mean, you look at snow sports, or slight decline, backpacking. I mean, the indoor climbing is really exploding right now, and it's really. I think that came through at the show. I think that was the cool thing about the show, is it was so exciting to walk into that room and into those halls. I think everyone knew that they, were in a place that was on fire in a good way, and we're just loving it. So I mean, that's what I took away from the show. It was fun.
And I did take a meeting with Bill Zimmerman, who's the head of the CWA, and he indicated that the show floor was a record sell. They're looking to expand next year so that they have more room. You can tell that ballroom was filled to capacity. So those are all markers of an event that reflects an industry that's growing.
Mm-hmm. Well, we all made a pact to try and keep this to a half an hour, didn't we, guys?
We did.
Because we all love to talk, and we could be on here all the live long day. So thank you so much for joining us here. We are going to have the recording of this up on the New Normal Consulting website. Brad, if you could maybe shout out the URL to everybody.
www.newnormalconsulting.com.
Great. And we also have a follow-up blog post there where we'll cover some of the main themes, which is obviously we'll put the gateway drug in as probably point number one. Gym owners having a responsibility to stay indie. Gateway drug to the outdoors, keeping it simple, but keeping ethics for users who want to move from gyms to the outdoors. I think that's also really important. And then just the growth of the Climbing Wall Association. I'd love to put a little more information out there for our audience on that. And the fact that gyms are growing and that numbers are up across the board, because one pops up across the neighborhood from you doesn't mean that your membership's going to decline. And I think my favorite part of the whole conversation was the demographics that you guys shared, and the fact that diversity, youth, male, female, it's really a new lexicon, if you will, for the outdoor market. And I think if this truly is a place where newcomers to our industry will find a place in our industry, in our community, I couldn't be happier about that. That is going to be a great transition, and all the new energy that will bring, all the new perspective.
Well said, well summarized. That's awesome. Thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. You guys are the real deal.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. Until next time, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
How do we shut this thing off?
There we go.